Hey guys, and welcome back to Mad About Skin. In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit more about Korean sunscreens, SPF values, passes, fails, company values, and how all these things play together with the regulations over in Korea. This is going to be a little bit different to what I planned. I wanted to do a live stream and where we were expecting some new Korean SPF results to be released today. I was going to jump on and do it as a live stream. We could share the values, we could chat amongst ourselves on our thoughts and feelings towards the product. We're hoping a couple would pass, and so we can go and jump on the Korean sunscreen bandwagon again and know with confidence that the products we're using are what the SPF protection the companies say they are. However, things didn't really play through as I think a lot of us were anticipating, and so I thought let's switch it up, do it as a premiere so we can chat as we go along, but this video will then still be on YouTube. If you're watching it later, send me some love in the comments and say hi, but we can chat about it and talk as we go along. So as everyone is aware, since the Purito sunscreen scandal hit around 2 months ago, a lot of people have been questioning the efficacy of the sun protection that they're using and certain brands and products. Of course, we followed on with the Keep Cool and Soothe scandal, where after a lot of bullying and intimidation, they admitted as a brand that their product wasn't living up to the expected SPF value of consumers based on what they were putting on the bottle. This has obviously left a lot of people shook and wondering which brands they can trust and which they can't. We were promised today a release of some new data and information from the Korean Institute of Dermatological Sciences, which is going through a process of testing a lot of the most popular Korean and Japanese sunscreens on the market and testing them against their claims. We're expecting that data to come through today so we could share, we could digest, we could know once and for all which products passed and which products didn't and what the true SPF values were. That's particularly important for Keep Cool and Soothe because a lot of people have that product, and whilst the companies reached out and said we admit our product didn't live up to the standards and the values which we said on the bottle, they didn't actually disclose the true SPF value that you're getting from using that product. So a lot of people are left with product on their hands wondering whether it's safe to use, because there's a huge difference between it falling, from an SPF 50 to an SPF 45 and it going from an SPF 50 to an SPF 12, for example. Well, we had the grand release of the Korean Institute of Dermatological Sciences data, and to say it was a washout, I think would be an understatement. Now, I'm going to leave a link to the video from the Korean Institute of Dermatological Sciences below. Obviously, I would ask that you don't leave any, if you read some of the comments under that video, I think it's a little bit unfair. This is an independent organisation undertaking testing on their own behalf and at their own cost. And of course, they can release what they want and what they feel comfortable with on the back of it. So I don't think throwing hate and shade on them is necessarily the right way forward. So I would just call that out in this video. However, I, like a lot of people, I imagine, were left a little bit disappointed that what they actually released wasn't hard and fast data, which we fangirl hard over on this channel. We want to know the values, we want to know what we're using and the science to back that up. They actually released some blurred images, which you can work out which products they are based on that if you understand and have some knowledge of the market and whether they passed or failed to meet the SPF requirement that the company stated. So let's talk about the good news first, then we'll talk about the thoughts and feelings on the back of that. The good news is 2 of the products tested passed. So this does mean we can draw a line under every single Korean sunscreen tested being failed and not living up to the SPF of 50. We could draw a line under that because 2 of the products did pass. Actually, one of them was a Japanese brand, Biore. This is the product and this is the one that I use. This is the watery essence in the gel formulation. Passed and was determined to be above an SPF of 50 within the margin of error. Obviously, all these tests do have a margin of error. It could be just below, just above, but it definitely can be categorized as SPF 50 or above. So that does leave us some hope. A product I actually like and enjoy and does actually deliver the SPF value that we wanted. Whilst none of the hard and fast data was actually released, it did say that the SPF value was 55.7 plus or minus 10. That large variation is pretty standard when you're in the initial stages of quite a long-term test process, so that's nothing to be worried about, and again, just gives us some confidence in some of the products we're using and Biore as a brand, because obviously if you can have confidence in one product, that I think is a logical step to then have confidence in some of their other products and different formulations. They also tested another one, I hope, which I think I'm pronouncing that right. It appeared to be that brand, and again, that passed. So that's a brand which isn't really that dominant in the West, but it's a huge Korean brand that lots of Koreans go hard for and is really, really popular. So again, I think it's really good that we can celebrate 2 Korean sunscreens, well, one Japanese and one Korean sunscreen, actually passing the SPF value test, which, has to be a good thing for our own options as consumers. However, we were all there with bated breath, desperate to find out what the true SPF value of the Keep Cool and Soothe was, and all we got was a blurred image that was very clearly Keep Cool and Soothe and then Bamboo Essence with failed written across it. That's it. Well, we kind of knew that. And so this comes on to a little bit more of a discussion that I want to have around some of the rules and regulations governing Korean cosmetics, Korean business, and how this sometimes plays into what our perceptions are in the West and what we can really expect from a lot of these brands. I want to caveat this because there is a lot of chatter online that when anyone calls out or says that they have doubts in the Korean testing regime or that they have doubts in some of the way that things are done, that it's xenophobic or that we never call out American scandals or British scandals. I just wanted to caveat with this. This is in no way meant in a derogatory way towards the Korean way of doing business or the Korean way of testing products. Actually, there are cultural differences between all our countries and we have to respect those. But we also have to be mindful of them when we make our own decisions. And so whilst the Korean sunscreen has been through a bit of a rough time recently, also there's been plenty of scandals in Australia, which has one of the tightest, well now as a result of a lot of these scandals, the tightest rules and regulations around sunscreen. There's been American and US sunscreen scandals. There's certainly been a fair few here in Europe and the UK. So in no way is this meant to be all Korean sunscreen is bad and everyone else's is amazing. Everybody, all countries have had their own issues with this. It's just at the moment the spotlight's been shone on Korea, and I'm sure that'll shift in time. I believe the true reason we didn't get the true SPF values of these products is due to the really harsh anti-defamation laws that are there in Korea. So different countries obviously have their different laws governing what is classed as defamation and what you're able to say against a business or an individual before that becomes a legal matter. Over in Korea, they're famed for having some of the hardest anti-defamation laws in the world, which means it's really difficult to speak out against a company or against an individual without having your absolute hard facts behind you. Now, of course, I don't think it's acceptable to defame a company or an individual in any circumstances. And so I'm not calling it out as a bad thing that they have these laws, but it does govern how things are reported. So today is a great example where here under the West, we would probably have released the figures, we would probably have released a little bit more data than was. It was seen as a little bit of less than transparent, let's say that, when they released a blurred image of the two that passed, which we have to guess what they are, and then of course the blurred image of the Keep Cool and Soothe product as a fail. Didn't actually release the SPF values or even the range of SPF values, because none of these are a hard and fast number. They all come with a margin of error, but even that wasn't released. This for me is a little bit problematic, not because I have an issue with the way Koreans choose to do their business and their laws, that is for them to decide rather than for me. However, the way I want to engage with my products and the way I think we're engineered to engage with our products here in the West is if you think there's a problem, you should be releasing that data. It might not be 100% accurate, but it would certainly give a guide. Whilst a lot of people might see this lack of full disclosure of the results and the hard and fast data as almost like a cover-up or transparency, a lack of transparency, I actually think it comes down to the fact that if in Korea you release these sort of data against a company and it's not proven to be 100% to the mark, factually accurate, then you do open yourself up from lawsuits from people like Keep Cool and Soothe and other companies that you might be releasing data on. So they take a much more cautious approach. Whilst, I'm not here to judge which is the right and wrong approach, feel free to leave any comments that you want in terms of this. For me, as a consumer, I would like to know, particularly if they've got some doubts around a product. I don't expect everything to be 100% nailed on, factually accurate, but I would like to have known what the figure was and the margin of error around that so I'm able to make my own conclusions and draw my own conclusions about the products that I choose to use. And so this is really where I think a lot of the chatter online comes about when people say, is Korean sunscreen, Korean sunscreen industry, is it a conspiracy? Is it shady? Is there a lack of transparency? Because when these things do crop up, very rare is it we actually get to know the true figures and the data behind them. Take, for example, Purito. Purito was a standout issue because they actually released the data and that was followed up by some subsequent data which was then released. That was very much a one-off event. If you look at the other things which haven't, so Klairs UV Watery Essence is a really good example. So Klairs was another brand which was created in the same lab as Purito. So it's assumed to have a similar issue as Purito, though that's absolutely not being confirmed. Klairs withdrew their product from sale, which I think was the right thing to do and they should be applauded for, and issued refunds. However, they never actually stated what the true SPF value of the product was. I think this is where things become problematic. There's been no tests, independent third-party verifications on the Klairs product, revealing what the true SPF is. And again, that comes back to a lot of the anti-defamation laws, I believe, that are there and present in Korea. The same goes for Keep Cool and Soothe. They've come out and said our product didn't live up to expectations with withdrawing it from market, but never did they actually come out and say what the SPF value was. And because of the rules and the regulations around doing business in Korea, I do think that then limits what other people are able to share, in this case, the Institute of Dermatological Sciences. I don't think for 1 minute that there is a conspiracy or a mass movement to try and limit transparency in the Korean sunscreen industry or the Korean beauty industry in general. I just think it comes down to different ways of doing business. And so us as consumers, we have to make a call on what we want to purchase. And a number of factors will come into that. If you want to know, the second there is an issue, you want to know as much data is available at that point, then perhaps looking to Korean businesses and Korean companies might not be the right one for you and for your personal purchasing decisions. That's because when these issues do come down, you very rarely see the hard and fast data. Purito was very much an exception. It was done in Western laboratories, which obviously are a little bit shielded from some of the anti-defamation legislation, but that's really a very unique set of circumstances. And normally when we see it, products might be pulled from sale. Things like the Keep Cool and Soothe statement might be released saying we're sorry, it doesn't live up to things, but very rarely do you get the full data that sits behind it. If that's something that you're expecting as a consumer, then perhaps the Korean sunscreen market isn't the one for you. That's not to say it's bad. That's not to say all of the products should be tarred with the same brush. It's just an appreciation of a different way of doing business. For me as a consumer, I'm absolutely thrilled that the Biore sunscreen, which I do know and love, has passed test. Yes, we don't have that exact figures, but do you know what? I'm happy to know that it has passed an independent third-party testing, so I'm going to continue to use it. I'm really pleased for the IHOP product as well, though that's not something that's particularly available in the West. Again, it gives some confidence to the Korean consumers who'll be able to purchase that product with confidence. Whilst we don't know the true value of the Keep Cool and Soothe essence, in a way, I don't actually care because I decided based on their previous behaviour, which I documented in a video here, I wasn't going to purchase them from anyway. So, you know, they could be 49 and just falling short, or they could be 12 and be way short. I actually don't care because it's not a company that I'll be giving my hard-earned money to anytime soon. In terms of some other testing which has gone on, I do want to share some success stories. So over in New Zealand, a Cancer Society did release a whole suite of testing that they did on some major brands. Whilst quite a few did fail, and again, comes back to this not being a Korean specific issue. You know, there have been scandals and failures across the globe. Whilst a couple did fail, some of the big brands performed really well. Particularly Nivea came out looking really good from that. The Cancer Society, which is a society does also manufacture sunscreens over there, did really well. And this brand, which is one that I've been using quite some time, and I'm so delighted for, is Skinnies. They also came to find out their Conquer, which is the SPF 50, was found to deliver an SPF of 50 plus and the right UVA and UVB protection. So I think that's wonderful because I actually really love this company. You know, they're cruelty free. They offer reef safe options. I just think they're a really gorgeous brand. I actually did a whole review on their products, which I'll leave a link to up there if you want to check it out. I really like Skinnies as a brand. I love the packaging. It's a little bit expensive, but a little goes a long way. And a lot of people read them to filth when they first launched because they don't use water in any of their products, which is almost unheard of for sunscreen. These are super concentrated. So a little does spread a long way and delivers a really good level of protection without needing a super huge amount. So they say to use a pea-sized amount, which a lot of people read them to filth for and said, that can't possibly work. You should never use a pea-size amount, and it's really bad to be advertising that. I always say read the instructions and use as per the instructions from the manufacturer. They've done the testing. They know their stuff. So a pea-size amount worked really well for me. I took this on holiday in the summer when I was exposed to a lot of sunscreen, sunlight and UV rays, and it worked brilliantly for me. So I was really impressed. I prefer the SPF 30 to the 50. It works really well for me, but they do both options so you can choose between the two. They came out and they passed muster when it came down to their testing. So again, that's something to celebrate. I actually think what this has taught me as a whole, like just to conclude, what this has taught me as a consumer is that we shouldn't just blindly expect the same standards across the world as what we get in the country that we're maybe used to when we buy most into. I don't think there is a conspiracy. I don't think there's a cover-up. I don't think any of that's going on. I think it's just a different way of doing business. And so if you are somebody that wants the hard and fast data, you want as much information as possible when a scandal hits, and you want companies to be held to account by these third-party organisations, then maybe Korean products aren't necessarily the ones for you. Different laws apply differently across the world, and so whilst people like the Korean Institute of Dermatological Sciences conduct these tests, they have to be super cautious as to what they report, and there's almost like a climate of fear around the anti-defamation legislation there, because nobody wants to be sued and to be threatened. A lot of people have called out the really harsh bullying response which Keep Cool and Soothe issues to anyone that dared to question the validity of their sunscreen, which was since proved true, was as a result of that culture of working in the anti-defamation, much more litigious style of business environment. And so actually we should maybe have made some allowances for cultural differences. I personally don't subscribe to that, because I think if you're going to do business in a country, you should maybe understand how that then manifests itself in some of the differences. I think that's the responsibility on the brand itself, and I still think their approach was bullying and intimidating, and so it didn't wash well with me, which is why I've made a decision not to purchase from them again. But it is something to really think about and maybe, factor into any decisions that you want to make, which is what I wanted to call it out. So I'm drawing a line under the whole Korean sunscreen saga. I've got options. I've got the Skinnies, you've got the Bure UV Essence, products which we can use. A lot of Western sunscreens, whilst they might have had their issues in the past, are now testing really well. I called out like Nivea earlier. So I think we have a lot of options. And so I'm drawing a line under this, and I'm going to be looking, keeping with the firm favourites, because I think the more we search for data, the more we're going to be disappointed that perhaps it just isn't going to exist. They're not going to release it, and certain laws and practices just prohibit that full transparency. So I'll leave you to make your own conclusions, but please leave them in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed chatting it through today, and wherever you are in the world, guys, stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.